Hello, 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 everybody. Nice to see you again. It is Corliss Webb from Faith Unfiltered. Well, how are you today? Well, I'm doing just fine. Thank you very much for asking. So, today, our focus is still on healing, as always. So, today we're going to focus on what Matthew, Mark, and Luke talk about as they talk about how Peter's mother-in-law got healed. Okay, so this story, like I said, is told in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And I'm going to go over each of the versions and each of the stories and just kind of talk a little bit about each one. And then I'm going to focus on two specific things in each one of these versions. One is Jesus touched to heal. And then the second thing is Jesus rebuked. Okay, so let me go over, let me get my notes here. Got my notes. All right, so the first one is in Matthew chapter 8, verses 14 and 15. And I'm not going to read each a section because it's going to take way too long. I'm going to leave that for your homework. You got stuff to do too. So I'm just going to generalize. Or summarize, should I say. Okay, so in Matthew chapter 8, verses 14, right, where we at? Right, 14 and 15. Just summarizing, it says, Jesus went to Simon Peter's house. Now, the backstory of Simon Peter, he used his real name, his birth name was Simon. Jesus changed his name to Peter. That means the rock, blah, blah, blah. That's for another teaching. I'm not going to go over that right here. But Jesus went to Simon Peter's house. When he got there, Jesus saw Peter's mother-in-law lying sick with a fever. And then Jesus touched her hand and the fever left. Then she arose and served them. Now that's Matthew's account of the situation. And this is Mark's account of the situation. Mark starts with, as soon as they came out of the church. Now remember, Jesus was always teaching or preaching somewhere in somebody's church, causing all kind of disruption and carrying on. And so he doesn't fail. So as soon as they came out of church, meaning they was Jesus and his disciples at that time, which was, I think was only just four of them. Simon, who was also Peter, Andrew, James, and John. I think it was just the four. At this point, he develops the 12. But they went to Simon, and it says Simon and Andrew's house is what Mark says. And then it says James and John were with them. Simon's mother-in-law lay sick with a fever. They told him about her at once. So, let me hold that thought. Jesus took her hand and lifted her up. Immediately, the fever left her and she served them. Now, the differences right there between Matthew and Mark's versions are Mark says that Jesus touched her hand, Matthew's version says Jesus touched her hand. Mark's version says that Jesus took her by the hand and lifted her up. Okay, so isn't it interesting that that three different people were at the same situation in the same time, and they kind of saw some differences there, I just thought that was interesting. Mark says that her fever left immediately. Matthew doesn't mention the time frame there. And so that just kind of lets you know, just kind of paying attention to a little bit of detail. This is one of the ways that Jesus talks to us, Jesus speaks to us, is definitely through his word. He'll and it all, because it lets us know that we cannot put God or Jesus in a box. You know, if we say, okay, well, he healed all of these people by laying it on their hands, then we can't say that's the only way people can get healed. If we say that Jesus spoke over these people, we can't say that that's the only way that Jesus healed or that people can get healed. You know, Jesus is a very versatile kind of guy. You know, he doesn't always do what you think he's going to do the way you think he's going to do it. You know, otherwise, then, you know, anybody could just be God because they could just mimic what it is that they see or hear or say or things like that. And that's why we have to continuously rely on God. We can't just say, okay, I remember how you did that before. I'm just going to do it the same way this time. You can't do that with Jesus because he is the one and only true God. And if you knew everything about him, then you would be like Satan and try to be like God. And, you know, you just can't do it. It just ain't going to happen. Okay? So I just find those two differences there. Matthew says Jesus touched. Mark says Jesus took her by the hand and lifted her up. Now, let's go to Luke's version because Luke gives us a lot more detail about the situation than Matthew and Mark. So in Luke's account, he says that Jesus left the church and went to Simon's home. Okay, so Mark also said that Jesus left the church. So they was with him. And so they left the synagogue where Jesus was teaching. And then Simon's mother-in-law was sick with a high fever. See, Luke says the fever was high. Matthew and Mark does not distinguish the level of the fever. They just say she had a fever. But we're going to go ahead and assume that the fever was high if she was laying in the bed and she wasn't able to move and she wasn't able to do anything or get up. So we can definitely kind of imagine, right, what kind of fever that was. Because remember, if you've ever had a fever, you know, you kind of lay flat. You're almost paralyzed. You can't do anything, right? And then Luke goes on to say they made a request of Jesus concerning her, meaning they talked to, just like Mark said in his account, they talked to Jesus about Simon's mother-in-law. Because remember, they had just seen a couple signs. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But they had just seen a couple signs, a couple ways that Jesus had already healed. And so it never dawned on them about Simon Peter's mother-in-law because they were just probably so amazed and so astonished at the things that they saw. She didn't, you know, kind of come to mind very quickly. But when they got to his house, then definitely they was like, oh yeah, this is the guy that can do that can do some stuff. So let us tell her about them. Tell him about her. Okay. So after they made the request, after they told Jesus all about his mother-in-law, what was happening with her, it says here that Jesus stood over her and rebuked the fever, and it left her. Interesting. And then Luke's account says immediately she rose and served them. Okay, so like I said, the first thing I wanted to talk about today was touched to heal. So in all three versions, there was some version of Jesus putting his hands on her somewhere. Matthew says he touched her. Now it doesn't say how she was touched, like, you know, maybe he put her hand on her shoulder, on her arm. So maybe, you know, he put his hand on her forehead or something like that. It doesn't really say specifically, but, you know, do we need to get that granular with things, right? The other thing I want to mention is, so he touched in terms of Jesus touching, even in Mark's version, when he said he took her hand, so he still had to touch her hand, right? So he took her hand, and he pulled her up, because it says, and lifted her up. So he took her hand and he pulled her up, as if to say, why are you laying here again? I'm not understanding. Do you know who I am? And I command you to get up. And so he lifted her up. And at that moment, boom, she was free from this fever. So there's lots and lots and lots of accounts where Jesus spoke to people, where Jesus laid his hands on people. We're going to talk about those quite a bit in future videos. But in this particular one, this is one of the situations with Simon's mother-in-law where Jesus laid his hands on someone, and they got immediately healed. So the second thing I want to talk about today was Jesus rebuking. So let's talk about that word rebuke. So you know what I do, I looked it up. Okay. So when I looked it up in Merriam's dictionary, really, really easy, something that we all can do, it gave me these words. So to rebuke means to criticize sharply, to reprimand, strong disapproval, scold, condemn, to criticize, and to blame. So basically, what did I say in my notes? Basically, to rebuke basically means speaking sternly, but speaking. So you have to actually say something. Now, whether it's a stern speak or a soft speak or, you know, a different kind of speak, you still must speak. So let's talk a little bit more about that speaking. So we're going to go back. We're going to go back to Matthew. And this time, we're going to go back to Matthew. We're going to look at back in chapter 8. We're going to look at verses 16 and 17. And they read, now these I'm going to read because they're not that long. When evening had come, they brought him many who were demon possessed, and he cast out the spirits with a word, and he healed all who were sick, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, he himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses. Okay. So in verse 16, it says, when evening had come. Now they're still at Simon Peter's house, right? His mother, his mother-in-law had just gotten healed. So they're having dinner. And, you know, they're probably having a good time. They're talking. They're, you know, kind of engaging with each other and things like that. Now, at nighttime, here comes the nighttime. Now, by then, people had heard what he had done in the church. They had heard his sermon in the church, and they wanted to know more. They had seen, so we'll read a little bit later on what they saw, a healing that they saw in the church that made them run and following Jesus. Okay, so it says, verse 16, when evening had come, they brought him many. Now I'm assuming that the they here are James, John, Peter, or Simon, and his brother Andrew. I'm assuming that they are the they that the verse is talking about here, because they brought them to the house, where the house, Simon Peter and his wife's house. They brought to him many who were demon possessed, and he cast out spirits with a word and healed all who were sick. And so what I want to focus on there is the fact that Jesus cast out demons with a word. So he spoke. You know, our words really mean a whole lot. I have several videos where I talk about how important the word is, how important it is that we speak, right? And by rebuking in these situations, Jesus spoke to the demons and he rebuked them, causing them not even to say anything. Right? So that's Matthew's version, Matthew's account in 16 and 17. So let's go to Mark. Let's go to Mark's account, what happened in Mark. And we're going to look at Mark chapter 1. Yeah, we're at Mark chapter 1. We're starting at verse 32. Now, this is where the three gospels, they really kind of come in tune. It looks like they saw the same things in these situations. So it says, now at evening, which is the same thing Matthew said, when the sun had set, they brought to him all who were sick and those who were demon possessed. So we're looking at 32 to 34. And the whole city was gathered together at the door. Now, they're at the door of Simon Peter's house, right? So it's a lot of people in this town. Then he healed many who were sick with various diseases, and cast out many demons, and he did not allow the demons to speak because they knew him. Now in the morning, having risen a long time before daylight, he went out and departed to a solitary place, and there he prayed. Okay. So in verse 35, it says, he cast out many demons, and he did not allow the demons to speak. Okay, so how did he cast out many demons? By rebuking them. By just his words. He didn't give this great big hallelujah prayer. He wasn't kind of raising his hands all over the place. He didn't even give another sermon. He just basically, all he did was he spoke to the demon and he rebuked it, and he commanded it to come out of the person. And and it says, when it says here, where is it? Cast out many demons, and he did not allow the demons to speak. Okay? So when we're casting out demons, when we're casting out anything, we can't allow that thing to speak more or speak over what it is that we're saying. Right now, I'm not going to get into like what's a demon and what's Satan and all that kind of stuff, because that's definitely a whole nother teaching right there. But what I'm saying is, whether it's a demon, now your demon, what's your demon? Right? Your demon could be the fever that his mother-in-law was experiencing. Your demon could be a pain somewhere in your body. Your demon can be a disease that you are experiencing right now. Your demon can be even your thoughts, right? That's telling you that you're not worthy, that you're not this, that you're not that, and we have to overcome those things. And how do we do that? We do that by speaking the word, and we can only speak the word that we have in us. So if we don't have the word in us, then we cannot speak that word. We generally speak the words that we generally have in us that we know. So for instance, let's say let's go with something detrimental, right? Let's go with cancer or heart disease, or even kidney disease. Let's go with something like really major, because it seems like the little things we don't pay attention to, but we definitely pay attention to the big demons, like, the cancers and the heart disease and things like that. Okay. So let's say we're dealing with that kind of thing, and, we start to feel the pain come on, and then the thoughts kind of come in our mind saying you're not worthy. See, that Jesus stuff doesn't work. I knew it wasn't going to work. Those are the thoughts that's kind of going. Those are the thought demons that's going on in your head. And then your body responds, and your body says, yep, you got a pain here, you got a pain there, and it's not going to go away. There's nothing you can do about it. And then the doctors, they monopolize on that, and they say, there's nothing that we can do. All we can do is try to make the person as comfortable as possible. But the word says that we are already healed. By his stripes, we were healed. Were is past tense. That means something that's already done. We also know, based in the book of Colossians, that Jesus is sitting at the right hand of God. Jesus defeated Satan and all of his imps when he went down into the grave. He dumped all of your sicknesses, all of your diseases, all of your negative thoughts, all of your thises and all of your thatses. He dumped all of that stuff in the grave. And then on his way up, now this story is in the book of Colossians. On his way up to heaven, he mocked Satan and all of his imps. You know how you remember Eddie Murphy back in the day when he would say, I got some ice cream. I got some ice cream and you don't got none. You remember that? Right? So that's what Jesus did on his way up to heaven. He was like, I defeated you. I defeated you, right? And there's nothing that Satan can do about it because, some of those imps, some of those demons are already locked up, and some of them are walking the earth, which is why we kind of have those thoughts. And some of them will be defeated once the end of the world starts happening, those kinds of things, right? So. So, that's kind of where we are. And we have to speak to those demons. I always go back to Mark 11:22-24. It says to speak to our mountains. If you got something in your way, use that word. The word works. It is sharper and can pierce it's sharper than any two-edged sword and can pierce the toughest, whatever you have for it, right? The word works. We don't believe that the word works sometimes because we do it once and nothing happens. And we just say, see, that word doesn't work. But the Bible says that faith comes by hearing and hearing and hearing and hearing. And then guess what else you have to do? Hear some more. Because once just as a great example, I love movies. I love watching movies. I like action movies the most, right? And I will watch one movie over and over and over again. And it seems like every time I watch it, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was there. Oh, I never heard them say that part, right? Same thing with the word. We can't just read it once and assume that, something is definitely going to happen. Although it can, because we are dealing with a God who is omniscient. It can happen at one time. But guess what? You'll read that same scripture 5 years later and you'll get a whole new revelation of it. Okay, so we can't just stop at reading the word once. We have to continue to read it and continue to read it and let that word settle in our hearts. And that way, when those demons come, boom, they'll be like, no, I can't penetrate that right there. I know I can't do anything with that. And the reason is because it says, the word says to resist the enemy and he will flee. Cling to God. And he will give you submit to God, and he will give you whatever it is that you need. Okay, so that's kind of what's happening there in verse 34 of the book of Mark. In verse 34 of the book of Mark, right? Cast out many demons, and he did not allow the demons to speak because the demons know him. See, the thing about demons and Satan and all of that kind of stuff is that, the Bible says that Satan knows the word. Satan even goes to church, right? So, knowing the word means nothing to him. You believe in the word, now you're stepping on his toes, right? Because if you don't believe, then why are you even saying it? And you can tell by you can tell that you believe because something happens, right? Now, when I say something happens, that doesn't mean that you're going to have like fireworks or, it's going to be this, awesome orchestrated, feat. It's something that's really something, and it can be that way, but sometimes it's just really subtle. I remember when I would get these bumps on my body and, they used to just hurt so much. And then I started praying about it and I started rebuking them and I started talking to them and telling them, oh, no, you are not in control of me. I am in control of this body and you must go. You know, it doesn't have to be, you don't need a paragraph. You just need a phrase. And you need to believe in your heart that what you are saying with your mouth will come to pass. And, you know, the bumps, they did go away, but interestingly enough, they came back. But when they came back, they didn't even hurt nearly as much as they did before. And then I got to a point where they don't even come back anymore. See, because they know I know the word. They know that I believe what the word says. And they know that even if they do come back, I'm going to hit you with the word. So you might as well don't even waste your time. Okay. So that's kind of where you need to be when you're talking to these kinds of demons. Okay. So that is Mark's version. This is going to blow your mind because it blew mine. Let's go to Luke. Let's look at Luke's version. So we're going to go to Luke chapter 4, and we're going to start at verse 31. Luke chapter 4, verse 31. Right? Now, what we read was, what was it that we read? We started at verse 38 in Luke, that's where Luke talks about Peter's mother-in-law. We're going to start at Luke verse 31, and this is before Peter and the other disciples and Jesus got to Peter's house. So we're going to start at verse 31, and we're going to read down to verse 37, right? So verse 31 says, "Then he went down to Capernaum, a city of Galilee, and was teaching them on the Sabbaths. And they were astonished at his teaching, for his word was with authority. Now in the synagogue there was a man who had a spirit of an unclean demon. And he cried out with a loud voice, saying, 'Let us alone. What have we to do with you, Jesus of Nazareth? Did you come to destroy us? I know you, who you are, the Holy One of God.' But Jesus rebuked him, saying, 'Be quiet and come out of him.' And when the demon had thrown him in their midst, it came out of him and did not hurt him." Okay, so I'm going to start right there. And so let's go back. Let me go back and break this down a little bit. Okay. So they was in Capernaum, and he was teaching on the Sabbath. That's a whole other teaching, so I'm not going to get into that. And they were astonished, they being the people in the church, they were astonished at his teaching because he taught with authority. See, you and I have that same authority because Jesus lives in us. Now in the church. Okay, so remember when I said Satan goes to church. Okay, he's probably sitting there right next to you. You might even be the one who even brought him. Okay, so Satan goes to church because it says, verse 33, "Now in the synagogue there was a man who had a spirit of an unclean demon." Right? "And he cried out with a loud voice." Now, Satan needs a body in order for him to function. I am reminded of this really, really old movie called The Hidden. And it was this alien that came to Earth to kind of try to take over Earth. So he was coming to scope it out, like the wise men, not the wise men. He was coming to scope it out, so he can bring the rest of his tribe on down, right? And the only way that he could do that is if he lived inside of a body. And you can tell that he lived inside a body because the person would be a complete 180 from the kind of person that they were. So if they were a calm, cool, and collected kind of person, now all of a sudden when this alien got inside of them, they was this person who did things like racing cars and killing people and, all that kind of stuff. So it was a complete 180 of the kind of person that they were. This is how Satan kind of affects you, right? Of an unclean spirit, and he cried out with a loud voice. Now, I don't think that the man whom he was in cried out. I think that he used the voice of the man whom he possessed cried out, because he doesn't have a voice. You give him a voice when you repeat what he says or when you do the things that he wants you to do. So he cried out, and because he knew that Jesus was there, right? So saying, you know, the man cried out, or Satan cried out using the man's voice, let us alone. Okay. This is in verse 34. Let us. Now, us means more than one. Otherwise, he would have said, let me alone. Because, see, that's how much of a coward Satan is, because he don't travel by himself. He got friends. And his friends, they all come together and they bushwink you, they jump on you, they hoodwink you, you know, and the whole 9 yards. So in other words, you know, let's say you got a pimple here, right? All of a sudden you got a pimple here and you got a pimple down here, and they all kind of coming together, and now all of a sudden we're calling that cancer, right? Because he doesn't like to travel alone. Think about it. You know, those old sayings, when it rains, it pours, 3 strikes and you're out, you know. So he doesn't do things by himself. He need a posse. With Jesus, you know, he got his disciples so they can go out and do the same thing he was doing. They could do it by themselves. They could do it in a group. You know, they didn't need any help. We don't need any help. You can be alone in your room, in your home, by yourself. No one else did but you. Well, God is always there because he's always with you. But no one else, like another person, not there with you. And you can knock Satan out just like that in seconds. That's how deep this is. But anyway, because y'all off track now. Okay, so it says, let us alone, meaning, you know, there's more than one spirit in him. What have we to do with you, Jesus of Nazareth? Now, even though some people don't believe in God and don't, you know, worship God and, you know, don't accept God or anything like that, you know, this lets you know that even Satan know who Jesus is. And even Satan is afraid of Jesus, because he said, let us alone. What have we to do with you? And then he named him Jesus of Nazareth. Now, okay. Have you ever seen someone coming that for whatever reason you can't explain it, knew that they was trouble? You knew that they was trouble. And the first, you see them coming, and the first thing you say to yourself is, no. Just no. Okay? Why? Because you knew in your spirit that that person ain't worth any good. You knew in your spirit, you could tell in your spirit that something just ain't right. You know, you didn't know, you may not have been able to identify it or call it or what it was. You just knew something just ain't right. So, you know, just know, right? Satan is doing the same thing. He knows who Jesus is. He knows that his days are numbered. He knows what Jesus can do. So he's like, you are not even supposed to be here right now. It is just supposed to be all about me. But Jesus is like, nope, you cannot stay here. You got to go. And that's what Jesus did. And so Satan says, did you come to destroy us? I know you, who you are, the Holy One of God. And then in verse 35, but Jesus rebuked him. So we go back to that rebuke. So remember the meaning of rebuke, right? Let me go back to my notes. So rebuke, to criticize, to reprimand, to scold, to condemn, right? So that's what we're going to do with this devil. We're going to tell him, no, you got to go. You are not supposed to be here. You must go now. And that's exactly what Jesus did. He told him, be quiet. Okay, now let's look at that a little bit more, right? I don't believe that Jesus was like, okay, be quiet and come out of him, because that's not rebuking. That's it's just too subtle. It's just too, oh, well, if you want to leave, you can, but you don't really have to. No, it says that Jesus rebuked him, just like Jesus rebuked Simon's mother-in-law's fever. He talked sternly with him. He talked with authority with him. He talked like he meant business. So I can see Jesus, if I'm standing there, just imagine yourself in this situation and you're one of the onlookers. I can see Jesus saying, be quiet. Be quiet and come out of him now. Now that means you mean business. You're not playing around. You're not playing no games. Okay. For instance, your kid, no matter how old they are, they need to listen to you. Because even me, if my mother was still here and I was doing something that she didn't like and she looked at me sternly and she gave me a stern message, then I would immediately just jump to attention. Okay, I need to stop doing that, right? So think about it. Your kids, when you need them to stop doing something, if you keep saying, okay, now Johnny, now look, Johnny, now I'm trying to tell you, if you keep doing that, this is going to happen and that's going to happen. You're trying to have this, formal conversation with the kid. What you need to do is you need to say, Johnny, now look at here. Now I done told you, okay? That's being stern. You're not trying to bring him down. You're not trying to condemn him. But you need for him to listen, because if he doesn't listen, then he's going to suffer some consequences. That's what Jesus is doing with Satan. And that is how we need to treat our demons. That's how we need to treat our demon of cancer, our demon of heart disease, our demon of asthma, our demon of allergies, our demon of whatever it is that's trying to overtake you. Because, Satan is just a bully. Imagine Satan, just being a blanket over you, right? You can't see, you can't hear, you can't touch, you can't do anything. He's paralyzed you. That's what Satan does. That's his job. John 10:10, he comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And if he can do those things, he's got you. Okay? So that's what we have to do. We have to speak sternly. We have to rebuke. And, again, it doesn't have to be this long, drawn-out prayer. It doesn't even have to be loud. Okay? If you're in a crowd and you don't want everybody to know what it is that you're doing, you can't say it to yourself, just as sternly, and it works. I've done it and it works. Or if you're in that crowd, you can yell it out. God doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you get it done. Okay? Because we want to overcome the enemy. Okay? And when the demon, so moving on in verse 35, and when the demon had thrown him in their midst, it came out of him and did not hurt him. Okay? So, he mad. He mad now. He got much attitude. Okay? Because he didn't want to go. And this was his home, and this is where he was living. It doesn't say in this particular situation how long he was there, but this is where he was living. This is where he decided to make his home. And he had to immediately go, and he didn't want to go. So on his way out, he just smacked him. You know how you try to get that sucker punch in there, right? That's what Satan will try to do. He'll try to get that sucker punch in there. And so what he'll do is, let's say, that cancer is just about gone. That pain that you feeling is just kind of almost gone. And let's say it just goes away. The next day it came right back. You rebuked him again and it goes away. In another 2 weeks, it came back. You rebuked them again and it goes away. So let's say it just kind of keep happening, right? Why? Why does that happen? Because Satan says, This here is my home, and you cannot kick me out. I don't even believe that you believe that you can kick me out using the words that you're using. And so if I can come back, then I'm going to come back. That's the way he works. At the moment that you stop believing because, it just kind of keeps coming back and keeps coming back and keeps coming back, you got to keep speaking and keep speaking and keep speaking, because Satan is not going to give up that easily. This was his home. Think about it. There's been some situations where there was this big piece of furniture that I wanted to keep. It was really nice. I really liked it. And we were moving. Me and the kids were moving. And one time when we were moving, we did move kind of a lot. But one time when we were moving, they said to me, "Mom, it's time to give up the ghost. You're going to have to let that go." And I was like, why? I didn't understand. It wasn't broken. Wasn't nothing wrong with it. It was just really big, that big kind of computer furniture. When computers kind of first came out, you had the whole hub and you had the desk, you had the drawers. I was proud of that thing. I put it together and everything. But they was like, "Mom, time to let it go." And I was like, no, I am not going to let it go. There's nothing wrong with this. Well, Satan is the same way. No, I'm not leaving. This is my home. I can live here. I can do whatever I want here. I can kill this person. I can make them take all kind of medication. I can mess with their mind. I can mess with their thoughts. I can mess with their finances. I can mess with their livelihood. I can mess with your social life. Why would I leave? Okay? But eventually, I had to get rid of the piece of furniture. And I did. And once I got rid of the piece of furniture, I could see why it was best for me to get rid of that piece of furniture. Because one, they were tired of breaking it down and putting it back up. They were tired of carrying it. They were tired of moving it from one place to the next place. And then we were able to purchase a much smaller, more convenient type of furniture that we could use that did the same thing. Okay? So the enemy he's not ready to leave his home. Especially since he's been there and it's been so comfortable and he's been able to talk to you and, your life has been just kind of going downhill since then. He's straight. He's cool. He is not leaving. Okay. So that's what this verse in 35 said. That's why it says, when the demon had thrown him in their midst, right? So he's showing off. All these people in this church is watching him, and he's going to prove that he is in control, that he has power. But once he did that, he left because there wasn't anything else for him to do. Right? And it's the same thing that's going to happen to us. Once we put that word on him, he's got to go. Because even remember when after Jesus got baptized by John the Baptist, he went straight into the wilderness. And he tried to tempt Jesus. Every time he tried to tempt him and tell him some other great mystery or, whatever it is that he was going to try to do for him, Jesus rebuked him with the word. With the word. He didn't use water or sand or any kind of fight. He fought with his word. So that's what it is that we have to do. Okay. So then, so I kind of wanted to go back in Luke. So let's go forward now. So let's go to verse 40, right? Now, verse 40 starts, this is after Jesus healed Peter's mother-in-law. So in verse 40, it says, "Now when the sun was setting, all those who had anyone sick with various diseases brought them to him, and he laid his hands on every one of them and healed them. And demons also came out of many, crying out and saying, 'You are the Christ, the Son of God.' And he, Jesus, rebuking them, did not allow them to speak, for they knew that he was the Christ." Okay? So we can't allow the enemy to say things louder than what the word says. As soon as that pain comes, as soon as that thought comes, we have to immediately rebuke it. Because if we don't, it starts to roll around in our head and it starts to roll around in our brains. And like I said, I love movies, but think about what the actors are saying. You know, when things happen, they'll say things like, well, what if this? What if that? How do we do this? How do we do that? You know, you get a big group of people who are experiencing in some type of situation, you're going to have all kinds of things going on. You know, you're going to have one person who's the aggressor, right? He's going to try to do everything he can to get everybody out, but it's not working. You know, and then you have the one person who's over in the corner sobbing, who's afraid. Well, everybody's afraid, but they're showing their fear by sobbing, you know? That's how the enemy works. He feeds on what you are doing, what you are saying, how you are feeling, and he takes that and maximizes it. You know, in a previous video that I did, I talked about your level of faith, and I held up a red 1/3 cup of faith, right? If that's where your faith is, you can either increase that faith or you can decrease that faith. And the way that you do that is by hearing the word and being a doer of the word, not just a hearer. Okay. So, what is the moral of the story? Let's see. So if Jesus lives in us, according to Romans 8:11, we have the same power living in us that raised Jesus from the dead, right? When we speak, it has the same power because we're not using our power. We don't have any power. If we did, then when we speak about cancer and we tell cancer to go away, it's going to be like, do what? Who are you talking to? Right? But if we use the power that's within us through the Holy Spirit from God, then when we speak, we have the same power that Jesus had when he was risen from the dead. And like I said before, Satan is a bully. Okay? So he's a bully that's invisible. He's like an invisible bully. So think about the bullies that you either were or experienced or try to be, you know, in coming up in school and things like that, right? Why was that bully happening? What could that bully do? You could physically with your eyes see and sometimes feel that bully messing with you, right? Satan is the same way. He's just invisible. So when he puts cancer on you, when he has a fever, when you have a fever, when you have a cold, when you have allergies, when you accept all those things, when you have those things, you're just accepting them and you're dealing with them, you're managing them, right? But what you have to do is you have to tell that bully, no, rebuke that bully and get that bully out of your life. You just can't see it, so we just accept what we've been told by the doctor. We accept the pain, and we accept it by taking medications. Now, disclaimer here, I'm not saying don't go see your doctor or stop taking your medications. I cannot do that. I am not in the medical field. But what I am saying is that the word works. If you're taking medication, if you're going to the doctor, please keep doing that. Okay, don't say that Corliss Webb from Faith Unfiltered said, I need to stop taking whatever I'm taking or stop going to the doctor, because you're not there yet. Good, better, best. Sorry. I talk about good, better, best in a previous video. So you're not at your good, better, best yet. So don't stop doing things until you have really felt like you have heard from the Lord to stop doing those things. But know that the word is powerful. Okay, and Satan is a bully. He has already been defeated, and we know that he's already been defeated because Jesus is sitting at the right hand of God, and he has already prepared a place for us right now. Not when we die, not when we go to heaven, but right now he has prepared that place for us, because we can live heaven here on earth as it is in heaven, right? Okay, so how do we do these things? Well, I've already talked about that in this video and in previous videos, just by speaking. Speak the word, rebuke the enemy, resist the enemy, submit to God. That's basically it. Okay, so let me give you a quick example And then we'll move on from there. Okay. So let's say your manager at work, they have this great idea, this great project that will really put the team ahead and not behind. Okay. And so they brought you all into a room, and the manager is thinking. They're thinking about this great idea. And there, you can see it all over their face. They start smiling. They might even stand up. They might, do some hand gestures, because they are thinking about this grand idea that is really going to take the company to heights that you have never seen before. But they're thinking this, and you're all in the room. What are you thinking? You're probably looking at your manager going, what's going on? I don't understand. Are they having a fit? What are we doing here if we're all just sitting here just looking at each other? Right? It's not until the manager starts talking and telling you what the plan is, what the project is, what the merger is, what the this is, what the that is. It's not until they actually start speaking that you can start getting excited, right? Same thing. It is not until you start speaking that things will begin to happen. You can't think these things. You just can't, because the Bible doesn't say, think on these things and your mountain will move. It does say to think on things that are lovely and good and of a good report and things like that. That's one way to defeat the enemy. But when the enemy, when Satan is being a bully and trying to overtake you, particularly with sickness and disease, because that is our focus, you can't think these things. The Bible says, speak to your mountain. And again, like I said, when you start speaking, it doesn't have to be loud. You can speak under your breath, right? Satan, you go now. And believe it in your heart. See, it's also a heart thing, right? If you just speaking it just kind of willy-nilly and you don't really mean it, think about it. If you keep telling your kids, stop doing that, stop doing that, stop doing that, they know you don't mean it because there's no consequence. They know that if they keep doing it, you're not going to come behind them and reprimand them some more. So they just keep doing it because they know they can get away with it. The enemy is the same way. Satan and his imps, they're the same way. You have to speak it with your mouth and believe it in your heart. That's even how you get saved, right? Speak with your mouth, believe in your heart, and you shall be saved. There's no fireworks. There's no drum roll. That's it. It's done. Right? That's what we have to believe when we're talking about a healing. Believe in our heart, speak it with our mouth, and it is done. Okay? Now, what that means is, now, it could be done immediately. It could be done in 24 hours. It could be done in 24 days. This year, next year, it's done. What you're doing is you're trying to celebrate, or you want to celebrate the manifestation of it. But at the moment that you speak, the word says, is when you are healed. It doesn't matter when the manifestation comes. You're healed at the moment that you speak it. The manifestation will follow up. One thing that you can read about that is about the fig tree. Right? I would encourage you to read about the fig tree in Matthew. I forget where it is, but read about the fig tree in Matthew, how Jesus rebuked the fig tree. And it died at that moment. It could no longer produce any figs. Okay? So it's not, the manifestation of your healing is not when you get healed. You get healed at the moment that you speak. Okay? So that is the moment, that is the moral of our story here. So I want to thank you. That's all I have for you today. So I want to thank you for listening in yet again. And I pray that you will take these teachings and really do them. Get into your word Everything that I'm saying, I encourage you to go back to the Word, read the Word, allow the Holy Spirit to give you revelation and give you knowledge and wisdom about what He is saying specifically to you. Because you can read the same scripture every day, and every day you can get a new revelation. So thanks again for listening. I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.